Time for the Wednesday Wrangle now. One of my favourite segments on the Kenny program. We have plenty to get through. Joining me is Sky News host Liz Storer. Great to see you in the studio. And star columnist and ABC radio presenter, I might say, Justin Smith. How are you, Justin?
A mark of distinction,
Hello to both
Justin.
of you. Lovely to chat.
Can you believe that, Liz? He's been moonlighting on ABC radio.
I know. Actually, it's a badge of honour for them that they had you on, despite being a Sky News commentator in your spare time.
Look, I do what I can. I do what I can to get by. I'm just a struggling, battling kind of journalist, and whatever it takes to get by, you two.
Well, I listened, Justin.
Thanks for mentioning.
I listened. You did an outstanding job. You did a really, really good job. Now, we've got New South Wales Premier Chris Minns today. He's banned retail trade on Anzac Day to, in his words, restore respect to the National Day of Remembrance. One of the retailers, Liz, that I saw today came out and said, well, we're not going to be able to survive. We won't be able to go to the supermarket and we won't be able to go to Westfield and I can't cope.
They're missing the point. That's not what Anzac Day is about. I think this should be something national. This is something that Albo should come out, encourage all the states to do. And this is particularly refreshing coming from a Labor Premier who doesn't so much, given they were so for the voice and everything.
But he's one of the reasonable Labor Premiers.
He is.
I mean,
he is. And I will give Minns that much, most definitely. But in terms of restoring the respect, this is something that we need to talk about a lot more. And it's wonderful to see the need for that acknowledged and in such a tangible way. But when we've got kids coming out of school, kids coming out of university now, just 2 weeks ago we were talking about war memorials that had been defaced and graffitied. Yep. These kids haven't been taught a respect for our fallen. They haven't been taught about our nation's history and about how sacred this day is. Instead, they're taught things like colonialism, white shame was what I would call it in short. We're seeing now so many stories, nearly almost one a week, Steve, about how kids are now seeing the Australian anthem being meddled with, and it's all about DEI.
Someone today wants to rename the Cook River, for God's sake.
Yeah, exactly.
Justin, you live in the great socialist state of Victoria. They're unlikely to follow suit, I wouldn't think.
Look, I don't know. I think it's a great move from Christopher Minns, but look, I don't... And I would love to see it brought in here. We haven't got it, and I would like to see them do it. But I don't agree that young people are feeling that way about Anzac Day. I don't think Anzac Day has ever been stronger. I've got to say that one of the great honours of my life is that I'm the MC of the dawn service at the Shrine of Remembrance. And I'm standing there in front of 40,000 people, a lot of them kids, and you can hear a pin drop. They understand exactly what the day is about. And everyone I know feels incredibly strong about Anzac Day. So although I think it's a great move, I think we're far from crisis point here. I think Anzac Day has never been stronger.
I don't think crisis point, but I think it's all credit due to the parents of those children rather than the education systems that we currently have in our state.
I'm older than both of you, but back in the 60s and 70s, Anzac Day dawn services were not attended by people in my generation.
Yeah, they were dead, weren't they?
No one would go. And now, and I've been to a dawn service where Justin's been hosting it. I love seeing the kids there. And, you know, on that, by the way, I mean, I mentioned the Cooks River. We've got another day, another proposal to rewrite history. Cooks River could be renamed, now forgive me, Liz, if I don't get this right, Gulay Yari, which means place of pelican dreaming. It's been called the change, tokenistic activism. I might go to Justin first because I suspect the pelican lover might support this idea. What do you think?
No, I don't actually. Look, I think there's a better way of doing it. And look, let's not make fun of the name because I think it's a beautiful name.
Not making fun of it.
And I think that the background behind it, I think is kind of beautiful. Yeah, but let's not do that. But I actually don't agree with this because I think anyone who's been slagging off at Cook should spend a little time reading his diaries and finding out a bit about him. He is a part of Australian history, quite a big part of Australian history, and so is the Indigenous part. Let's try and get them together a bit more instead of actually just shutting down a river and saying, look, we're not going to call it Cook anymore, we're going to call it something completely different. I don't think that is the way to do it. I don't think that works.
We are swamped with calling names of things under Indigenous names now.
Yes, and of course, everyone knows this is doing nothing.
Did you know the AFL had a round a couple of weeks ago where all of the teams were called by their Indigenous name?
Can you imagine how confusing that was to everyone watching?
Particularly for someone like the Adelaide Crows, who started life as the Toyota Camry Crows.
Oh, wow.
There's hardly a long Indigenous history there.
Indeed. And what really gets people's goats about this is not that they're racist or anything of the sort. It simply does nothing to improve the quality of life for Indigenous Aussies in Australia. And until we're seeing the numbers come down in terms of the systemic abuse that goes on in some communities, whether that's alcoholism, whether that's sexual abuse, whether that's kids who aren't going to school, whether that's the disproportionate number of women who are victims of domestic violence, until we are seeing improvement in those crucially important KPIs, nothing else matters. You can rename everything in the country.
The tokenism. If you're not making a real difference in those communities. And we saw again this week, Alice Springs, again, hit by violence once more.
Yeah, you know, sure, it's got to have meaning behind it. And surely the whole point behind renaming something or talking about it in a different way is to bring people along with you and to win people over, not just to shut something down. I might mention, you mentioned about the Adelaide Crows. Toyota is a Japanese name, and yet people were still able to get their tongues around that at some point as well. So I don't think it's, you know...
What?
I don't know.
Well, you're talking about how are we going to pronounce these Indigenous names? Well, we learned how to say Toyota, didn't we, without too much trouble.
It's how it's spelled, and I'm sure the Japanese make fun of us for our pronunciation of Toyota because that's the Australian way of saying it.
Donald Trump, let's talk about the great man. He's going hard on the campaign trail. He's come up with quite a challenge. Now, I want to get your view on this, you two. He's challenged Joe Biden after that disastrous debate to a new challenge. Have a listen to Donald Trump.
In the debate, Sleepy Joe also declared that he wanted to test his skills and stamina against mine on the golf course. Can you believe this? Did you ever see him swing? I'm also officially challenging Cricket Joe to an 18-hole golf match right here. I will give him 10 strokes a side, and if he wins, I will give the charity of his choice, any charity that he wants, $1 million.
He went on to say that if this event, if it came about, would be bigger than the Masters, biggest sporting event in the history of the world. Everyone would be tuning in.
I think more people would tune into this than they did to the actual debate. But of course, Trump's making this challenge knowing that Biden is incapable of it. Sadly, we're now seeing a Parkinson's expert saying on national TV in America, I very much think this guy actually has all the signs of Parkinson's. So it's not just his mental acuity that people are worried about now. It is the physical aspect of being an older man.